Well, I'm going to go ahead and start recording. And the ones who are late can back up and watch the beginning. Y'all were here, so thank you for being on. Okay, let me pull up the video. Well, it's not wanting to show anything. All right, so this video is about, this is just the wrist and the hand movements. So practice these. These will be on your practical exam. And then we will go over what else is going to be on the practical exam, and that will be on Wednesday morning. We will have NC class Wednesday morning. So just be prepared for your practical that morning. Okay, so here's this.
Another video about the wrist and the hand joints, specifically the joint movements. Okay, that's.
Can you hear and see it?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Head right into it. Okay, so here we are back in the slides for the wrist and the hand, and we're going to talk about joint movements. So the wrist joint first, this is a condyloid type joint. It allows for flexion, extension, adduction, which is going to be this way, because if we're in anatomical position, pinky comes toward the midline, and abduction. We also call this ulnar and radial deviation, but we'll talk about that later. And this motion occurs primarily between the distal radius and the proximal row of carpals. Okay, so it's going to be right in here that most of that motion at the wrist occurs. Although we do have a little bit of movement at the rest of the between the rest of the wrist bones. This is called the radiocarpal joint, and we're just going to refer to it as the wrist. Now, the range of motion, we tend to have 70 to 90 degrees of wrist flexion, 65 to 85 degrees of extension, so slightly less, but very close, 15 to 25 degrees of abduction, and 25 to 40 degrees of adduction. Now each finger has 3 joints, the metacarpal phalangeal, or MCP joint, so that's going to be between the metacarpal, right here, and the first phalange. And then the proximal interphalangeal joint, that will be between that first phalange and the second phalange. And the distal interphalangeal joint, that will be between this middle phalanx and the distal phalanx. Okay, so 3 joints between the 4 different bones, here, here, and here. MCP, PIP, and DIP. Now the thumb only has 2 joints, the MCP joint, which is right here, and the IP joint, or interphalangeal, which is right here. Now, in addition to those 2 joints that the thumb has, we also have the CMC, or carpometacarpal joint. So really, does the thumb have 2 joints? Well, this third joint, I don't know, I kind of say it has 3. This third joint, the CMC joint, is the unique saddle type joint that allows for opposition and repositioning of the thumb. Okay, so we mentioned that the wrist can do flexion and extension, that's in the sagittal plane, abduction and adduction in the frontal plane. Fingers can flex and extend. But the MCP, or metacarpophalangeal joints, can also abduct and adduct. And let's look at what all of those look like. So abduction is movement not away from the midline of the body when we're talking about the fingers, but it's movement of the first and second and fourth and fifth fingers away from the third finger. So here is an example of wrist flexion and finger flexion at the same time. And we're going to see soon that you have some muscles that do perform both of these actions. And here's wrist and finger extension. Now for wrist extension, you can move past anatomical position. For finger extension, you really can't move too far past it. It's really just returning from finger flexion. And then we have abduction, also called radial flexion or radial deviation. Movement of the thumb side of the hand toward the lateral aspect or radial side of the forearm. And then we also have phalangeal abduction. Remember, that's 1 and 2 and 3, and 4 and 5, moving away from 3. And we also have wrist adduction. So now we're moving towards the little finger side, or the pinky finger, and phalangeal adduction. Now moving all of those digits back towards the third digit. And finally, we have opposition and reposition of the thumb at that CMT joint. So opposition is moving the thumb opposite of the rest of your fingers so that you can manipulate objects and grasp things and throw things and make tools and make fire and use an iPad. Reposition is putting that thumb back in position. So that wraps up joint movements for the wrist and the hand. Tune in next time to talk about the muscles that cause those movements. Hey, thanks for sticking around to the end of the video with me. If you have any comments or questions about the wrist or the hand joint movements, leave them down below and I'd love to get back to you as soon as possible. To continue learning, let's head right over to this video to talk about the muscle actions of the wrist and hand. If you missed any of the previous videos or you want to skip ahead, head over to this playlist over here, Structural Kinesiology. As always, this is Dr. Gooden, trying to make kinesiology concepts approachable, applicable, and understandable. Thanks a lot. Hey, Dr. Gooden back with the last video in the series on the wrist and the hand joints. Today we're talking about the muscles of the wrist and hand. Okay, let's go learn about our bodies. Okay, so muscles of the wrist and hand. Now this section can be challenging for students because there are so many small muscles in the forearm. They're hard to palpate sometimes and differentiate from each other. But luckily, the names give us really big clues as to what each of these muscles does. So as far as the extrinsic muscles go, and remember we're going to focus on those extrinsic muscles, we have 6 muscles that move the wrist.
Okay, so what you're going to need to know are the movements of the hand and the wrist. And then that video, you can find that on your on YouTube yourself. That will definitely help you with the written exam. But I'm not going to ask you about the muscles on the practical. If you'd like for me to keep playing it, let me know and I can keep playing it for you. Or you can find it yourself. It's up to you. So which do you prefer? Anybody?
I'll just look it up myself, personally.
Anybody else? All right, so that there we have that. Now we're going to look at the hand grips. If you change over to the hands, chapter 13, give me 1 second. Let me pull up my PowerPoint. Um, yep. Okay, can everybody see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to look at the hand really quickly. You do need to know your CMC, where your carpals are, where your metacarpals are, and your interphalangeal or your PIP, DIP, and IP joints are, or IP, yeah, joints. Okay. So if you look at page 196, I'm sorry. Right there where the ulna and the radius is. Okay, and remember I said that the radius is connected to the carpals. The ulna is not. The radius is the bigger bone that's on the thumb side. If you look right above that, connected to the radius are the CMCs, or the carpals. Okay. You need to know where the carpals are, but you don't need to know the individual carpal bone names. If you were going to a hand therapy, or if you're going to outpatient therapy for your field work, then we'll get together and I'll give you some information on memorizing those. But just for everyday use, you don't really need to know, you don't need to memorize the names of those bones. Just know where the carpals are. And then right above that, the longer bones that are inside in the hands are called your metacarpals. Okay, your metacarpals join with each of your phalangeals. Okay, the proximal phalangeal or phalange is the one where your big knuckle is. It's the long bone between the bigger knuckle and right there in the middle. Okay, then you've got your middle phalange, and then the one at the very end is your distal. Okay, so you do need to know those, and you also need to know the movements that occur in each of those. All right, so at your carpometacarpal joint, that's the joint between the smaller bones in the wrist and the long bones in the hand. You've got flexion extension. If you're standing in the anatomical position, flexion would be bringing the hand up, and extension would be bringing it back down. Okay. abduction is moving away. Adduction is moving toward the midline. Then you've got your opposition and reposition, and that is your bringing the thumb in to touch the pinky. Okay. So that's opposition and reposition. That's what separates us from other animals, is our ability to have opposable thumbs. All right, so next you've got your metacarpal phalangeal joint, and what occurs there is flexion extension. So if you're holding your hand in the anatomical position, flexion will be bringing your fingers up. Extension would be bringing them back down. Okay. Then your interphalangeal joints is flexion extension. Okay, is there any questions on that? Okay. Okay, so your common wrist and hand pathologies. If you look back at, let me find. Your wrist, this is the hand, but let's talk about the wrist pathologies. You've got a Colles fracture, which is just a break in the distal radius. That one is very common with older people. I've treated a couple people that have had a Colles fracture. It takes a long time to rehabilitate those, especially with older people, because they have to keep them really still, and they are in casts. And older people, they a lot of times don't like to just sit still, don't like to keep their hands still. And the one lady that I had, one of the ladies that I had that had the Colles fracture, all she liked to do was knit. So that was all I could get her to do. So she had to learn a different way to knit by not moving her hand that had the fracture in it. And that was tough. That's all she wanted to learn to do was that. So I put a tennis ball on the end of her crochet hook, so she wouldn't have to use a smaller grip. She could use a bigger grip, and she could use her entire arm instead of just her wrist to knit. Then you've got a green stick fracture, and that's usually an incomplete fracture. And it's more proximal than a Colles, and that's more common in children and younger adults, but that's more like a twisting. The green stick, you'll actually see maybe pointy edges at the end of the bones that are broken off. And then let's talk about a ganglion cyst. You'll see a lot of those probably, especially if you work in skilled nursing. But ganglion cysts are just, they look nasty, but they're really not. They can appear, they can disappear, but it's just fluid. It's filled with fluid. They used to call these Bible bumps because they would take those great big family Bibles and smack them with them, and they would bust them. don't do that, but that's what they used to do. You've got wrist sprains. Normally, this is from the result of a foosh, a fall on an outstretched hand. These are very common. It's when the wrist gets hyperextended is when you'll see the wrist sprain. Very painful, but very common. Okay, then we'll move over to the hand, some of the common pathologies of the hand, and talk about some of the grasps that you will need to know. And especially if you are going into pediatrics, you are going to definitely need to know the different grasps. But some common wrist and hand pathologies, carpal tunnel syndrome, probably one of the most common that we've talked about. And you all should know what that consists of. It's usually like a tingling and tingling pain, especially when you flex your wrist. You've got de-Quervain's. That one is a pathology of the thumb. Polysis, if you, with medical terminology, polysis means thumb, and hallucis means big toe. So anytime that it refers to a polysis, like an extensor polysis, that means the thumb muscle that is responsible for extension, okay? So the de-Quervain's is inflammation of the sheath that surrounds that extensor polysis. Let's see. Skier's thumb, gatekeeper's thumb. Okay, some other common ones are the swan neck, boutonniere deformity. You've got a swan neck deformity, and that is flexion of the MCP, and then hyperextension of the PIP. That's common with osteoarthritis, especially, and you will see that mainly with older adults, but it's a common with that. And then you have the boutonniere deformity. That's the opposite of the swan neck. You've got extension of the MCP and then flexion of the PIP, extension of the DIP. I don't know if there is a picture of that in here, but you can look it up. It looks like it hurts, and it does, from what they tell me. Again, common with rheumatoid arthritis. Ulnar drift is another one that's very common with rheumatoid arthritis. That's when the ulnar, all of your MCPs start to drift to the ulnar side. Okay, so it looks like everything is moving toward the pinky. Another common one with RA. Mallet finger, disruption of the DIP joint mechanism. The other two aren't very common. Okay, now we're going to discuss some grasps. All right, so the functional position of your hand, that it's slightly hyperextended, and then the MCP and PIP, those are slightly flexed. So it's really it looks kind of like a C. Okay. For the practical, you will need to know these grasps. There's two different types of grips. There's a power grip and a precision grip. The power grip is used when you've got to do something forcefully. Okay. Using a hammer, things like that, that would be part of your power grip. Then you've got the precision grip, and that's when you need to manipulate an object. Like when you're going to pick something up with your, well, think about babies when they are finger feeding. That's more of a precision grip. Okay. So you've got different types, and I'm going to post a video on here for your different grips. That's not what we want. Well, let's look at precision grips. Well, I'm not seeing what I'm actually looking for. All right, well, those are all in your book. All they're wanting to show me is gun stuff. Okay, so when you're talking about power grips, this one is the one that usually requires the most amount or a significant amount of force. And that there's three common types. There's a cylindrical grip, a spherical grip, and a hook grip. A cylindrical grip, if you look at your book on page 215, has all the fingers grasped around an object. Okay, that's a cylindrical grip. So what can you think of that you do almost on a daily basis that requires a cylindrical grip?
Holding a pencil.
A pencil? No, that would be more of a precision grip.
Hand around the steering wheel.
Hand around the steering wheel. Yes, that would be more of a power grip. Okay, what about a spherical grip? Okay, spherical is sort of like a cylindrical, but the fingers are more spread apart in a spherical grip. And the book gives examples, but think about what you do every day that has a spherical grip. Think about holding a baseball. Okay, or the book gives you like holding an apple or picking up a glass by the top. That would be more of a spherical grip than a cylindrical grip. The ones of you that use the hair straighteners, would that be more of a cylindrical grip or a spherical grip?
That'd be cylindrical, wouldn't it?
I would think so. Yeah. Same with like when you got your hand wrapped around the hairbrush and you're brushing your hair down. That's a cylindrical grip. Okay. All right. The hook grip is when you've got the second through the fifth fingers that are flexed around an object like a hook. Think about holding a pocketbook or carrying a briefcase or even, carrying a backpack in your hand. All right, that's more of a hook grip. Okay. Those are your three power grips. Then you've got your precision grips, and you will need to know these as well. I'm not going to ask you every one of them. I'm going to ask you, I will ask you about one of the power grips and one of the precision grips. Okay. So you've got the pad to pad grip, pinch grip, 3-jaw chuck, tip to tip. So if you look at the pinch grip is when you're holding something between the thumb and one of your fingers. Okay. The book shows holding a coin, but what else can you think of that requires a pinch grip?
Picking up a piece of paper.
Picking up a piece of paper. Right. Okay. Then you've got your pad to pad, which is your MCP. Where is that? There's a pad to pad picture somewhere that we're not seeing. Well, anyway, that's part of your pinch grip. In order to do the pinch grip, you've got to be able to do pad to pad, okay, which means the pad of your thumb to the pad of one of your fingers. It doesn't necessarily mean like just the first finger. It can be any of your fingers, but that's a pad to pad, and that's the first step in a pincher grip, okay, or the pinch grip. Then you've got the 3-jaw chuck, or it's also called as a tripad grasp. That would be your holding your pencil. Okay. I prefer to call it tripod, but you'll see it in both. You'll see it either way. But just know that a 3-jaw chuck and a tripod is the same grasp, and it's a precision. Then you've got the tip to tip and the pincer. Then you've got the pad to side. So if you look at figure 1341, which is page 217, your pad to side is like holding a key. I've always called it lateral prehension, but it's known as both. So if you hear me say lateral prehension, it's the pad to side. It's like holding a key. What else can you think of that's like the pad to side instead of holding a key? What else would be? Anybody think of any other examples of the pad to side? Nope. All right, let's move on to the side to side. Similar to pad to side, but it's abduction of the index and middle finger. It's a very weak grip, but I do this a lot when I'm like holding my pen and sort of tapping it on the side when I'm thinking about something. That's a side to side grip. Lumbrical grip, or also known as the plate grip. That's when you're holding the thumb over top. Think about holding a plate. That's why it's called the plate grip. That's more of a balance grip, but it's a precision grip that's meant to elicit some balance. Okay. So those are your grips. You need to know those. All right, so you need to study this chapter, and we're going to go over really quickly. If you'll give me about 5 minutes to get this typed up, go take a little break, give me about 5 minutes, and I will get the practical typed up, okay?